Hi, you're watching our very special edition, Reporters Take 2016 Year in Review. I'm Sana Khan. Over the next 1 hour, we're going to focus on the year's biggest events from across the world, events that have or will in the year to come shape your world. The year 2016 saw a bitter US presidential election, the Syrian civil war taking a bloody turn in Aleppo, and the demonetisation scheme announced by the Narendra Modi government in India, among many other events. While it's time to look forward and see what the new year has in store for us, it is also the time to look back and see what the world went through in the last 365 days. In this edition, we talk to WION's correspondents to find out the major events they covered, their experiences, and the outlook for 2017. Our focus first on demonetisation, a move that came as a shock to India. Now, at the very offset, demonetisation drive may look like a bad idea, but many analysts say there are positives to it as well going forward.
₹500 and ₹1,000 currency notes presently in use will no longer be legal tender from midnight to night, that is 8th November 2016.
All right, Chethi Narla is with me. She's been tracking demonetisation very closely for WION. Chethi, give us a sense of what is the impact of demonetisation if we talk about the short term first.
Well, firstly, we must understand that this is like a chicken and egg situation. You have to first assess whether the Prime Minister had to maintain utmost secrecy or not. The only reason why people face so many on-ground impediments on the back of demonetisation was because it was blamed that the RBI and the Finance Ministry was unprepared for a move like that, which is why the common man today went through so many issues, whether it was long queues outside ATMs or banks not having enough cash to give to them. If they hadn't maintained the secrecy, people would have found loopholes to park their cash elsewhere, and what would have happened is there would have been more opportunity given to people to find loopholes within the system itself, which is why the secrecy was very important. In the short term, near term, there would be a knee-jerk reaction faced in the economy, of course, because you're wiping the economy out of cash. So obviously you will see a slowdown in the economy. You will see a fair bit of recession set into the economy as well. If you go through the macroeconomic reports that are coming out of most international and Indian brokerage agencies as well, you have seen a 1% downgrade as far as the GDP is concerned in India as well. The unbanked and the informal fragmented sector, the MSMEs and the cottage industries are the ones who are the most badly hit in the short term because they've been caught off guard. It's the shock doctrine economics philosophy at its best. So yes, in the near term, you are seeing the market see a fair bit of selling pressure coming in. You saw a huge amount of profit booking coming in as well. As far as the real estate sector is concerned, in many sectors which have the foundation as far as cash is concerned, where more cash transactions took place than white money went in, you saw them plummet literally. There was an official pricing for an asset, there was an unofficial pricing for an asset as well.
Right.
What really happened there was you have now gotten rid of the unofficial price for an asset because everything now will be parked in white money. As a result of this, your valuations come to the new normal, which means that earlier they were overvalued because there was more cash in the economy. Right. Now you have less cash in the economy, which is why your consumer discretionary spend has been reduced, which is why you will see sectors which were cash-based sectors really come to new valuations per se, which actually should be the exact valuations. Also, as far as the black money and counterfeit currency is concerned, in the near term, you have seen that that has gotten trapped. There are, of course, critics that say that you can circumvent this. You can also end up duplicating the new currency notes that the government has come up with, but it's not that easy to circumvent that. The new currency notes will not permit you to do that because they come with
We've seen a lot of backlash in terms of, the opposition, the government, bickering over this demonetization move. While the opposition says that the move is sudden and the common man is getting hit, but the government says, look, if you had to come up with such a big reform, these things are necessary and there's no other way that one can implement it. But there have to be pros and cons both of a move such of this magnitude, you know, the demonetization. Could you put that in perspective for us, the pros and the cons and what's being faced by Indians at this point?
Well, yes, the opposition, firstly, I'll address the opposition backlashing the ruling party. Of course, they have had a lot of these parliamentary winter sessions as well adjourned. No other issue really could be taken up. They are criticizing the government in a huge way because their point is about the common man getting impacted. What one must understand is, yes, the rural India and the poor has had a higher price to pay than the affluent Indian, because the affluent Indian is also the digital Indian, the new Indian who can work on technology, who can work on e-wallets, who has smartphones. The smartphone penetration in India, unfortunately, is not as high as you think it is, which is why the brunt of a move like that immediately trickles down onto the poor and the BTL populace of the society. Having said that, the government for the longest time has been talking about financial inclusion. They've been talking about digital India. They've been not just cashless economy, but less cash economy, just like the way you see in Western nations as well. So, of course, we are getting into a move like that. And as you rightly pointed out, a revolution of this nature will take time. If we try to assess the impact of it in a short term, you are going to find more cons than pros. But we have to wait and watch as to how the budget really comes out. Going forward, we have to wait and watch what kind of new policies are added as well to support a move like that. And I'm sure the government has thought through this, and our economy eventually going forward will hold fort. As far as the markets are concerned, you are seeing a new valuation set in on the stock markets as well. In fact, I was just doing the research the other day, and the premium in terms of valuation that India is enjoying versus the Asia peers have been hit actually. If you see the MSCI's 1-year forward price to earning, which is the P multiple, it was 16.85 on 8th November when this decision came out, compared to 12.84 for MSCI Asia Pacific ex-Japan after the demonetization move. On 6th December, I saw India's PE was at 15.9 compared to 12.59 for MSCI Asia Pacific ex-Japan as well. Clearly, the Indian market price to earning ratio has fallen much more than that of the Asia Pacific nations ex-Japan. This compression is probably the direct impact of demonetization. A lot of analysts say that this could also be the impact of Brexit, this could be the US election result, and too many factors combined at the same time. The answer could be yes. But demonetization has had a huge role to play in that as well. Having said that, the fundamentals of the Indian stock markets look strong, and I don't think India has anything to worry about.
All right. So we'll really have to wait and watch out what the next year holds for the Indian economy, because this indeed is a very crucial move. Thanks so much, Chetty, for joining us here and putting things in perspective. We move on to the other big story of the year. After being hospitalized for 2 months, Tamil Nadu's Chief Minister Jayalalithaa passed away, leaving the southern state in turmoil. After suffering a severe cardiac arrest on the 4th of December, Jayalalithaa, also known as Amma for her popularity and people-oriented policies as the Chief Minister, she left millions of supporters grief-stricken. A politician who was not only respected but worshipped for her schemes like the Cradle Baby scheme for the adoption of abandoned girl child. She also kick-started several notable public health programs, including the formation of state-run pharmaceutical companies and distribution of medicine and other items. The news of her death was accompanied by chaos outside of the hospital and the memorial hall as her supporters grew impatient and waited for hours to pay their last respects.
We're here outside at Rajaji grounds where they're paying last respect to the beloved leader of the southern state of Tamil Nadu. Supporters here gathered, distressed, saddened by the news that broke out last night. A lot of people gathered here just to get a last glimpse of the beloved leader. And a lot of remorse in Chennai and across the state of Tamil Nadu. A lot of people finding it difficult to cope with this situation. Saddened by the news this morning, a lot of people have gathered here just to get a last glimpse of their beloved leader. This is Jessica Taneja for WION in Chennai.
And let me go across to Jessica Taneja, who's with me in the studio. Jessica, what was it like, first of all, to cover an event of this magnitude, considering Jayalalithaa, was more of a demigod rather than a political figure or just the chief minister of the state?
Well, people, as you anticipated, there were a lot of people right when the news broke out that she had suffered a cardiac arrest on, the day before she died. Massive crowd, rather, people waiting patiently to understand what is going around. There was not much information, but at the same time, I'd rather add that the police and other security forces, it really took care of the situation. As earlier, but expect that anything that happened to Jayalalithaa in the past, there was always chaos. There was some certain incidents, emerging from parts of the state, but here everything was under control. But despite the the raging crowd and situations around, but as soon as the news broke out, we expected people, there were a lot of people going to Rajaji Hall Memorial just to pay their last respect, just because Jayalalithaa was considered Amma, as a mother who had done so much for the poor. Her pro-poor schemes, from establishing Amma canteens to giving, giving out medicines at nominal prices, even when Tamil Nadu floods had, occurred. She made sure that, food reached basic food reached every household. So yes, there was, anticipation that a lot of people wouldn't really accept that Amma was no more. And that sort of changed the mood in the entire state that very minute.
Right. Jessica, stay with me just to give a sense to our viewers of what the situation was like as far as the supporters were concerned, a support base in the state was concerned. Let's quickly take a look at this report.
When news began to spread that Jayalalithaa had suffered a cardiac arrest on Sunday night, Apollo Hospitals in Chennai was under siege. Not just party workers, but unknown faces. Common men and women from all walks of life stood on a vigil throughout the night, waiting on news about their beloved leader.
கழகத்தில் நீண்ட நாளாக இருக்கிறேன். புரட்சி தலைவர் எம்ஜிஆருக்கு அப்புறம் அம்மா தான் கட்சி காப்பாற்றுறாங்க. கோடிக்கணக்கான தொண்டர்கள் வழிந்து செல்றாங்க. அந்த அம்மா இப்போ உடல்நிலை சரியில்லாமல் படுத்திருக்கிறாங்க. நேற்றைக்கு புரளியின் காரணமாக பலவிதமான செய்திகள் வந்தது. ஆனால் இன்னைக்கு கேட்குறப்போ அம்மா நேற்றை விட இன்னைக்கு நல்லா இருக்கிறாங்கன்னு ஒரு நல்ல தகவல் எங்களுக்கு கிடைக்குது. இன்னும் தமிழ்நாட்டில் இருக்கக்கூடிய கழகத்தினுடைய தொண்டர்கள் செய்யக்கூடிய பிரார்த்தனையினுடைய விளைவாக அம்மா கடவுளின் குழந்தை.
As doctors battled to revive the chief minister, the vigil continued all of day during Monday. Hope was giving way to despair and soon to grief. By evening, various rumors began to spread, making the crowd restive and uncontrollable. At 11:30 in the night, when the news finally confirmed the worst fears for a despairing crowd, that the chief minister was no more, there was a sense of all-pervasive loss and gloom.
கடந்த காலங்களிலே ஏழை எளிய மக்களுக்கு பல நல்ல திட்டங்களை செய்து மக்களுக்காக நல்ல பணிகளை ஆற்றி வந்தார்கள். அப்படிப்பட்ட முதல்வர்கள் இனிமேல் எங்களுக்கு கிடைக்குமா என்று இந்த தொண்டர்கள் எண்ணி கண்ணீர் வடித்துக் கொண்டு இருக்கிறோம்.
அம்மாங்கிற ஸ்தானத்தை யாருக்குமே பெறாத அளவுக்கு இந்திரா காந்தியை கூட அம்மான்னு யாருக்கும் நினைக்கல. ஆனா அம்மா அம்மான்னு சொல்ற அளவுக்கு ஒரு நல்ல முயற்சி எடுத்து கொடுத்துறாங்க அம்மா.
With the chief minister laid to rest, for the people of Tamil Nadu, the reality has only just begun to sink in. A chief minister who is not Jayalalithaa, an AIADMK without Amma, an unknown chief minister, and a rudderless ship.
After the news of Jayalalithaa came out last night, there was pandemonium both outside the hospital and the political headquarters of her party. The streets were empty all day and the city is at a standstill. With camera person Chandrasekhar, this is Jessica Taneja for WION in Chennai.
Now, events of these magnitude are certainly very rare. We've seen Fidel Castro's passing away this year, huge crowds. We've seen Jayalalitha's passing away again, huge crowds. People, politicians who leave impact, on their supporters, on the state, on the country on the whole. They're cult figures. Was it, covering this event at any point overwhelming for you, Jessica?
Well, certainly it was. Right when I began, to ask people or to just understand what the sentiment was inside Apollo Hospital premises. There were people praying, chanting, singing hymns just for a speedy recovery. And since there was not much information, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of people were just anticipating that, they didn't want to hear the news of her passing away, but would rather expecting that, she would recover or she was recovering. So yes, it was a lot overwhelming.
So for some time, it was no news is good news scenario, right?
Yes,
they were waiting very patiently.
That certainly did fill the void, because people were impatient. But at the same time, I think that's the reason Apollo Hospital didn't really, want to sort of give out much information, because they were also waiting, trying to understand what's happening, and then they would want, because there are a lot of supporters, remember, who are anxious, desperately waiting.
And they were very careful and selective, secretive as well, throughout the entire phase of a treatment, wasn't it? Because they were aware of people's sentiments.
Also, when, there was a time where all of us were waiting for a medical bulletin, and I could see a crowd of 5 women who were absolutely devastated. They would cry, they would hope, and they would tell me, that we are actually waiting and we haven't heard anything so far. We've been waiting here since 5 in the morning, but we haven't heard anything. And this is just, this is just few people here. There were so many people on the Apollo Hospital stretch around. You could easily say around 10,000 people. But even when I spoke to them later in the night, although it did, seem, for a brief moment, it did seem that, there'll be some sort of chaos or some riots. But that didn't happen. The anxious supporters were just waiting, overwhelmed, saddened, not being able to understand what the situation is. And they would often tell me that she's done so much for us that we can't really think, what would the leadership look without her? What will Tamil Nadu look, without her?
In fact, that's my next question. Now, there's this huge void as far as the leadership in AIDMK is concerned. There were talks about who will succeed Jayalalithaa. We, of course, now have a successor. But how much? You've been speaking to political analysts. What do they say? How will the politics of the state now change with her not being around?
Well, it's been 15 years, now and then that AIDMK under Jayalalithaa has been functioning, without an outsider in Tamil Nadu, as a matter of fact. But now, a lot of political analysts actually told me that there is space or room for national parties also to finally get their hands or start, from basically entering Tamil Nadu, which they haven't been able to touch so far. But with Sasikala being, named as the party's general secretary and Paneerselvam is the chief minister at the moment, there's a lot that can be, changed in the future, because till the time when Jayalalithaa was there, nobody could sort of even think of interfering in the Tamil Nadu politics, because the situation was so firm. She held it firmly. But now, I think, the way it's going forward, we could see in the future. I mean, it really depends on how Tamil Nadu will accept Chinnamma, or she's rightly called as Sasikala, in the future. That will only take some time for us to know that whether we'll see any interventions from other national parties who've been waiting for a long time to just sort of start making their, space in Tamil Nadu.
Right, and the current leadership has about more than 4 years now, in fact, to prove their worth, what the party can do, even when the support of Jayalalithaa is not there. So in that sense, 2017 is going to be that first crucial year for the leadership in the AIDMK to make their mark, to carry on forward. Thanks so much, Jessica, for joining me on this discussion. With that, we move on to the other big story. 2016 was a bad year for India-Pakistan relations, if not the bloodiest. The 18 September attack on an Indian army camp at Uri in Jammu and Kashmir claimed the lives of 19 Indian soldiers, the single worst attack targeting the Indian armed forces since May of 2002. For India, the Uri attack was a provocation that could not be ignored, and the retaliation was swift. 12 days after the attack on the 29th of September, Indian Special Forces carried out a surgical strike across the line of control and destroyed launch pads used by terrorists to infiltrate into India. It was not the first time India mounted an audacious attack targeting Pakistan, but it certainly was the first time an Indian government publicly acknowledged carrying out such an operation. The Indian response sent out multiple messages at once. 1, it will impose costs on the perpetrators of terrorism. 2, it will not buy into the Pakistani narrative that non-state actors carry out terrorist attacks against India. And 3, India's patience is not inexhaustible, and crossing of the red lines by state or non-state actors will not go unchallenged. The cancellation of the SAARC summit to be held in Pakistan and breaking up the Balochistan issue were just a few of the developments that did not go unnoticed by countries in South Asia and beyond. Talk more about this, I have with me in the studio Ramesh Ramachandran, our correspondent, also Shailja Verma. I'll be talking to her as well in just a bit. But Ramesh, first coming to you, we've seen 2016, the way India-Pakistan ties have, gone from bad to worse. Give us a sense of what happened there.
Sana, there's never a dull moment in South Asia, and 2016 was no different. Now, the year got off to an ominous start with the attack on the Indian Air Force base at Pathankot in the northern Indian state of Jammu and Kashmir. So from there on, there have been a series of terrorist attacks at Handwara, at Pampur, and most recently at Nagrota, also in Jammu and Kashmir. So terrorism, cross-border infiltration, ceasefire violations are a recurrent theme in India-Pakistan relations. And then we saw a domino effect when India mounted a diplomatic offensive to isolate Pakistan in the region and beyond. We saw that manifest itself in the cancellation of the SAARC summit, for instance. We saw the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, speak from the ramparts of the Red Fort on the 15th of August, which is India's Independence Day, and rake up the Balochistan issue.
That's right.
So all that went into the narrative, and by the end of the year, we are at a situation where there is a standoff, there is an impasse, as it were, between India and Pakistan, and that's where things stand at the moment.
And no signs of them looking any better. But is there hope for the return of peace? That's one question that everybody, has on their mind at this point.
So that's $1 million question. But if the past is any indicator, then one can expect both sides to resume or to pick up the threads from where they left off. Now, to quote the Pakistani High Commissioner to India, the door is never open or shut, it is ajar, or partially open or half open. Or to quote the Indian Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj, who said that there are no full stops in India-Pakistan relations, only commas. So if the past is any indicator, then one can expect both sides to resume talks at some point going forward. When exactly that will happen, I can't say for sure, but the possibility of talks remain there.
Right. We can expect talks to resume, but obviously nobody knows when. Maybe 2017 will be a good year for the ties, after having seen such new lows. We'll continue talking more about this, also talk about the real aftermath of the heightened tensions between the two countries, the human cost. What followed the Uri terror attacks and the subsequent surgical strike by India this September is increased firing at the India-Pakistan border in Jammu and Kashmir, to the extent that tens of thousands of Indians living in the border villages in Punjab and Jammu and Kashmir had to leave their homes to live in refugee camps. Life at the border came to a standstill, with children having to skip their schools indefinitely. Shops were shut down as well. The border chose to risk, lives were put at risk. People were asked to stay back to take care of their farmlands and the cattle as well. Shailja, coming to you, you've traveled to the international border, the border between Jammu and Pakistan. What is the sense that you got in terms of humans, the people over there, getting affected by what was happening at the international stage between India and Pakistan?
Right, Sana. So, like Ramesh was pointing out earlier, that when we talk about the equations between India and Pakistan, it's always about the government and the politics of it all. We did not see the human element and the people stories in the narrative. But in 2016, in the aftermath of the Uri terror attacks and the surgical strikes that followed, we did see that the human element and the people stories really took that center stage, especially in Jammu and Kashmir, as well as other border states like Punjab. When I traveled to the border villages in Jammu and Kashmir, what we saw there was that there were tens and thousands of villagers who had to flee their homes to refugee camps, which were considered to be safer because these people really had no other options. And apart from that, life had literally come to a standstill. I remember that the first thing that I sensed when I reached some of the border villages was that there was absolute silence and a sense of fear among the few people who really chose to stay back.
that was a time when it was the peak season in the basmati farming belt, and some of the farmers there who we met, they really chose to stay back, risk their lives, because they really couldn't afford to leave their cattle and their farmlands behind. Schools were shut, children could not go to schools indefinitely. They were in the relief camps, old people, women, all of these lives were really affected. When we asked some of them what the solution really could be, they were really cautious in their answers, because these are people, remember, who have seen 2 wars. Previous generations have seen, the earlier wars. Those who really lived through Kargil war exactly know the aftermath that heightened tensions between India and Pakistan could bring about. So they were really, really conscious and measured in how India should respond when it comes to the cross-border fighting.
Right, they're in the thick of things, really, at a time when India and Pakistan, the tensions, they rise, they fall. But mostly we've seen 2016 as not a very great year in terms of the ties of the two are concerned. On that note, thanks so much, Ramesh, as well as Shelja, for joining me here and putting things in perspective.